Have you ever taken a cutting from a plant you absolutely love, popped it into a glass of water, and waited for roots to appear, only to watch the stem turn black, the water go cloudy, and the whole thing end up in the bin? It is so frustrating, especially when the plant was special. Maybe it was a rose from a bouquet, a bit of fuchsia from a neighbor's garden, a hydrangea you wanted to save, or a favorite houseplant on the kitchen windowsill. After a couple of failures, it is easy to think that taking cuttings is difficult, or that some people simply have the magic touch and others do not. But that is not true. Rooting cuttings is not luck, it is biology. And once you understand what the cutting actually needs, your success rate can change completely. Today, I want to show you a simple, practical method that gives cuttings the best possible start. It uses 3 natural ingredients, all easy to find, and it is based on an old gardening trick, often credited to traditional Chinese growers. Now, I am not going to promise that every dry old twig will turn into a plant overnight. Gardening does not work like that. But if the cutting is fresh and healthy, this method can help it form callus and start rooting much faster than plain water alone. And in some cases, you may see the first signs of life in as little as 48 hours. Before we get to the recipe, we need to understand why cuttings often fail in the first place. Most people cut a stem, put it in tap water, leave it on the windowsill, and hope for the best. It feels natural enough. Plants need water, so water should help. But the problem is that a cutting is not just a little stick. The moment you cut it, you create an open wound. That wound has no protection. The plant is stressed, it has no roots, and it has very limited energy. In many parts of the United Kingdom, tap water is treated with chlorine, and in some areas it is also quite hard. That does not always kill a cutting by itself, but it can make life harder for delicate plant tissue. The bigger issue is stagnant water. Once a cut stem sits in the same water for too long, bacteria and fungi can build up very quickly. Instead of using its energy to make roots, the cutting starts fighting rot. That is why the aim is not just to put the cutting in water. The aim is to create a clean, gentle, biologically active solution that protects the wound, wakes up the cells, and gives the cutting enough energy to begin repairing itself. Think of it as a little recovery drink for plants. The first ingredient is raw honey, not the highly processed stuff that has been heated and blended until most of the goodness has gone. Use proper raw honey if you can. Local honey from a farm shop or a good health food shop is ideal. Honey is useful for 2 reasons. First, it has natural antibacterial properties. When it touches the cut end of the stem, it helps protect that open wound from the microbes that cause rot. Second, honey contains simple sugars. A cutting with no roots and only a few leaves has very little energy coming in. A tiny amount of honey gives it an easy energy source at the very moment it needs it most. But do not overdo it. More honey is not better. Too much can make the water sticky and reduce oxygen around the stem. Use 1 teaspoon of raw honey in 1.5 liters of lukewarm water. The water should not be cold. Cold water shocks the cutting and honey does not dissolve properly. It should not be hot either, because heat can damage the useful compounds in the honey. Aim for room temperature, roughly 22 to 24 degrees Celsius. If you have a water butt and the water is clean, rainwater is excellent. If you are using tap water, let it stand overnight first. That gives some of the chlorine time to disperse and brings the water up to room temperature. The second ingredient is willow water. Willow is famous among gardeners for rooting easily. Push a fresh willow twig into damp soil and very often it will root without much fuss. That is because young willow stems contain natural compounds that help support root formation and plant recovery. To make willow water, cut young, flexible willow stems into short pieces, around 3 to 5 centimeters long. Put them in a jar, cover them with boiling water, and leave them to steep for about 24 hours. By the next day, you will have a pale, brownish infusion. That is your willow water. If you do not have willow nearby, you can use a very small amount of plain soluble aspirin as a rough alternative because it contains a related compound. But be careful. Do not use flavored tablets, coated tablets, or anything mixed with extra ingredients. For a gentle solution, use only a tiny amount. Too strong a dose can damage soft plant tissue, especially on tender cuttings. The third ingredient is succinic acid. This is less well known, but many plant growers use it as a stress support. It is not a fertilizer in the usual sense. It does not feed the plant with nitrogen or phosphorus. Instead, it helps the plant cells work more efficiently when they are under stress. You can often find succinic acid tablets or powder online, and sometimes in specialist gardening shops. For this recipe, use 1 small tablet of around half a gram in 2 liters of water. Crush it into a fine powder first, then dissolve it in lukewarm water. Now let us put the rooting solution together. Take 1.5 liters of clean, room temperature water. Add 1 teaspoon of raw honey and stir until it has fully dissolved. Then add about 150 milliliters of willow water. Finally, add the dissolved succinic acid. Mix it well. You should end up with a slightly cloudy liquid with a very mild, sweet smell. This is the solution we will use for the first stage of rooting. But the liquid is only half the story. The way you prepare the cutting matters just as much. A lot of people use kitchen scissors or an old pair of blunt secateurs. That is one of the quickest ways to ruin a cutting. A blunt tool does not make a clean cut. It crushes the stem. It damages the tiny channels that move water through the plant. Once those channels are crushed, the cutting struggles to drink properly. Use a sharp, clean blade. A grafting knife, a fresh craft knife, or very sharp secateurs will do. Before you cut, wipe the blade with surgical spirit or disinfect it properly. We are not just chopping a stick. We are doing tiny plant surgery. Make the cut at about 45 degrees. This gives the stem a larger surface area to absorb moisture and encourages root formation. Now comes the important little trick. On the lower part of the cutting, just above the cut end, make 2 or 3 very shallow vertical scratches. Each one should be about 1 centimeter long. Do not cut deep into the wood. You only want to lightly break the outer skin of the stem. Why do this? Because roots often form from the cambium layer, the thin, active layer just under the bark. By making these small scratches, you gently stimulate the cutting to repair itself. As it heals, it is more likely to form callus, and from that callus, roots can begin to grow. Once the cutting is prepared, do not leave it lying around. The cut end dries and oxidizes quickly. Place it straight into the rooting solution. The base of the cutting only needs to sit about 2 or 3 centimeters deep in the liquid. Do not drown the whole stem. It still needs air. Now look at the leaves. If there are lots of leaves, remove most of them. Leave only 2 small leaves at the top. If the remaining leaves are large, cut them in half. This may feel harsh, but it is important. Leaves lose moisture. A cutting with no roots cannot replace that moisture fast enough. If you leave too much foliage on it, the cutting dries out before it has had a chance to root. The goal is simple. Keep just enough leaf to support the plant, but not so much that it collapses from water loss. Now place the cuttings somewhere warm and bright, but not in direct sun. This is especially important in Britain, where light can be weak for much of the year, but a sunny windowsill can still heat a jar of water surprisingly quickly. A south-facing windowsill in summer can cook delicate cuttings. In winter, a cold windowsill can chill the water overnight. The best place is bright, indirect light, with a steady temperature of around 22 to 24 degrees Celsius. If the room is cold, place the jar on a folded towel, a cork mat, or a bit of polystyrene to protect it from a cold surface. Leave the cuttings in the rooting solution for 6 hours. This is a treatment stage, not a permanent home. During those 6 hours, the stem absorbs the active compounds, the honey helps protect the wound, and the willow water and succinic acid support the plant's recovery response. Do not leave the cuttings in this strong solution for days. After 6 hours, move them on. The next stage is clean water. Use cooled, boiled water, clean rainwater, or tap water that has been left to stand overnight. To keep the water fresher, add a small piece of activated charcoal or 1 crushed activated charcoal tablet. The charcoal helps absorb impurities and reduces the chance of the water turning sour. You can also add 1 or 2 drops of 3% hydrogen peroxide to a glass of water. It breaks down into water and oxygen, which can help keep the water fresher and discourage rot. Use only a tiny amount. More is not better. Now we need to create the right atmosphere around the cutting. This part is very important in British homes, especially from autumn through spring. Our outdoor air may be damp, but indoors, central heating can make the air surprisingly dry. A cutting without roots loses moisture fast, particularly if it is near a radiator. So we make a mini propagator. You can cover the cutting with a clear plastic bottle with the bottom cut off, a glass jar, a clear bag held away from the leaves, or a small lidded propagator. Inside that little cover, humidity stays high. The cutting loses far less moisture, and it can focus on making roots instead of simply trying not to wilt. But do not seal it up and forget it. A closed, damp space can grow mold. Once a day, lift the cover for 10 to 15 minutes to let in fresh air. While it is open, you can lightly mist the leaves with lukewarm water. If you have any of the honey and willow solution left, dilute it well before using it as a foliar spray. Use 1 part solution to 10 parts water. A very light mist is enough. Another useful tip is this. Cuttings often root better when the base is slightly warmer than the top. In other words, warm feet and a cooler head. That is why heated propagators work so well. You do not want to make the water hot, but gentle bottom heat can encourage roots to form. Around 24 to 25 degrees Celsius at the base is ideal for many cuttings. Just be careful with heat mats. Check the water regularly because warm water can go stale faster. And now comes the hardest part. Leave it alone. Do not pull the cutting out every few hours to see if anything has happened. Every time you move it, you can damage tiny new root initials before they even become visible. Watch through the glass instead. If everything has gone well, you may see changes after about 48 hours. On suitable softwood or semi-ripe cuttings, small pale bumps may appear around the scratched area. That is callus. Callus is the healing tissue from which new roots can develop. For some plants, it will happen quickly. For others, especially roses, woody herbs, climbers, or evergreens, it may take longer. That is normal. Do not panic if your cutting needs a week or 2. When the first tiny white roots appear, it is a brilliant moment. But this is where many beginners make a mistake. They wait until the roots are long, tangled, and impressive. It feels logical. More roots should mean a stronger plant. But water roots are delicate. They are soft, brittle, and used to life in water. If you wait until they are long, they often snap or struggle when moved into compost. The best time to pot up a cutting is when the new roots are still short, around 5 mm to 1 cm long. At that stage, they are young, flexible, and much more able to adapt to compost. Now let us talk about the compost. Do not use heavy garden soil. Especially here in the UK, garden soil can be cold, compacted, and far too wet for young roots. Fresh cuttings need something light, airy, and free-draining. A good starter mix is half peat-free seed compost or fine coir, 30% perlite or vermiculite, and 20% sharp sand. You can also add a little horticultural charcoal if you have it. The mix should hold some moisture, but still feel open and crumbly. If you squeeze it in your hand, it should not turn into a sticky lump. Use small pots or small plastic cups with drainage holes. Do not put a tiny cutting into a large pot. Too much compost stays wet for too long, and the roots can rot before they have a chance to spread. A pot of around 100 to 150 milliliters is plenty at the beginning. Make a small hole in the compost. Lower the cutting in carefully, making sure you do not break the new roots. Gently firm the compost around the stem, but do not press it hard. For the first watering, you can use a very weak version of the rooting solution, well diluted with clean water. This helps reduce transplant stress. Then cover the pot again with a clear cloche, bag, bottle, or propagator lid. Do not move the plants suddenly from high humidity to dry room air. That shock can make the leaves droop within hours. Harden it off gradually. On the first day, open the cover for about half an hour. On the second day, leave it open for an hour. On the third day, try a few hours. If the leaves stay firm and the plant looks fresh, you can slowly increase the time until the cover is no longer needed. Once you see new leaves forming, that is a very good sign. It means the cutting is no longer just surviving, it is beginning to grow. And that is the whole method. No mystery, no expensive rooting powder needed. Just clean water, a little raw honey, willow water, succinic acid, a sharp blade, good hygiene, steady warmth, and patience. This method can be used on many common garden and houseplants: roses, fuchsias, hydrangeas, pelargoniums, grapevines, figs, ficus, citrus, clematis, and many others. Some plants root easily, some take their time, some need a different season or a different type of cutting. That is gardening. But once you stop treating cuttings as little sticks in a glass and start treating them as living plants recovering from a wound, everything changes. So next time you trim a favorite plant, do not throw those stems away. Choose a healthy cutting, prepare it properly, and give it the right start. You might be surprised how much life is waiting inside one small piece of stem. I hope every cutting you take grows into a strong, healthy plant and brings a little more beauty to your garden, your windowsill, or your greenhouse. I will see you in the next video. Happy gardening!